Good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, January 23rd, and I am so honored today. We have Representative Andy Biggs joining us today. And Andy Biggs served in the Arizona legislation from 2003 until 2017. He ran for Congress in 2016, won, and then joined Congress in 2017. He was the chairman of the Freedom Caucus from 2019 to 2022 and has been a staunch supporter of Angel Family since our inception. And I am so happy to welcome Andy Biggs. Welcome.
Hey, Marianne. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. It's an honor having you. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, Andy.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, obviously I've been watching the Mayorkas impeachment hearings and following that pretty closely. Was pretty disappointed when he didn't show up when Angel Moms were testifying, which seems to be his modus of operation. He doesn't ever want to face the people who are being directly affected by his terrible policies and dereliction of duty. So how did that make you feel, and how do you think these impeachment hearings are going?
Well, so Secretary Mayorkas, this is the policy that he designed is what you're seeing on the border, and he's completely taken the wall away, effectiveness away, and basically enticed all these millions of people to come through. By the way, Marianne, just this week already, Congressional Budget Office calculated 6.2 million people have been released into the country under the Biden regime. But for Secretary Mayorkas, I was the first person to ever get him to come to Congress to speak. He came to the Border Security Caucus, and he didn't like that. And he's always said things that were not true. I mean, like when he says it's operational control. So he doesn't want to come in. He's going to misdirect and mislead and prevaricate. And number three, he definitely does not want to be there when he knows that victims of his policies will be there. He doesn't mind getting yelled at by members of Congress, but he does mind being confronted by victims such as the Angel families.
Yes, and the fentanyl poisoning is a huge thing right now, and that's overtaking the deaths by illegal criminals. Like my son was killed by an illegal criminal
Right.
in an auto accident, but the fentanyl poisonings are definitely taking over, and this is a high priority with Angel families to bring more awareness to this. When you stop and think about more people are killed every single year by fentanyl poisoning as a result of open borders than were killed in 9/11. This is happening annually. And Americans just don't seem to think that this is a problem. Because why? Because it's stretched over a year's time.
Well, so think of it this way, Marianne, you had 3,500 to 4,000 people basically murdered in the 9/11 tragedy. That was a criminal terrorist act. And you had for the last 2 years, over 100,000 people have died of drug overdose. Each year, 70 to 80,000 people from fentanyl poisoning. You have Chinese chemists who are actually embedded with cartel labs making fentanyl and bringing them across the border. And our Border Patrol agents who work their tail off, but they can't even man and staff the border and run the line because they're so busy dealing with the encounters. So they're processing and transporting them. So that leaves stretches. So one stretch of the border I was at, they have like 240 miles, but they could only patrol 4 miles of that stretch. And then I've been down the border many times. And there are times literally where there's no agent on the border for many miles, 12, 15, 20 miles that I'm driving along the border, and there's nobody there. And why is there nobody there? Because they're overrun with the gotaways, and not the gotaways, but the encounters, the people who are coming across and seeking asylum off the top. And so it that's what the cartels do. They want to flood the zone so they can get their drugs in and sell their drugs. They want to bring in, some people from China, or maybe it's Iran or some other place. Venezuela is close with Hamas, so they're bringing people. But Marianne, the policies of Mayorkas have opened up our border and created a national security threat. So you have the fentanyl poisoning going on, but you have increases of cocaine and heroin being trafficked. You have human trafficking going on, and then you have this importation of people who of dubious purpose to be here. They're coming in ostensibly as part of a foreign terrorist organization, and they're setting up shop in the United States.
Well, and some of these drugs, they've even gone further than fentanyl, and now there's horse tranquilizers that are being put in some of these fake pills, and Narcan's not going to stop that, and so they're looking for any and every way possible to poison, lethally poison American citizens. And that in itself, like, I was really surprised yesterday with the Supreme Court ruling that Amy Coney Barrett didn't rule on the side of Texas to prevent Border Patrol agents from cutting the concertina wire. I'm a mother. I've been affected in a way that Amy Barrett hasn't, but I'm a mother, and I don't want fentanyl coming across these borders, and I don't want illegal criminals, and I don't want terrorists coming across our border. So, and on top of that, the Constitution and how it's written about preventing an invasion and dereliction of duty and treason and all the things that she should know about, I'm really disappointed in her for that. But one of the big things that really got me this last week was when Representative Dan Goldberg was testifying at the Mayorkas hearing and was kind of asking that angel mom about, don't you think that we need more Border Patrol agents? And bravo to her for saying no. They're sandwich makers and they're processors. And you don't keep getting out a bigger box of Band-Aids to fix a cut on your arm. If it's deep and keeps bleeding, you go to the surgeon and you have it fixed. And this is what the Democrats fail to do. And they constantly put out there in the media that Republicans are failing to sign any of their border bills. But what America needs to understand is Republicans are saving us money and trying to force them to actually fix the problem and to quit putting Band-Aids on it. We don't need more Border Patrol agents because we have enough to patrol the border if that's where they were, right?
Yeah, so man, let's unpack a lot of what you were saying because there's so much there, Marianne. So the Supreme Court case. So what that really did is that created this mishmash, right? Because what they said is, CBP and the federal government can actually take down concertina wire that Texas has put up. But they didn't say that Texas couldn't keep putting up concertina wire. So Texas is going to keep putting it up. The federal government in some places is going to keep taking it down. And then they're going to have make a final ruling, 3 months from now. But in the meantime, they're at the current rate, Marianne, there'll be between 700,000 and 1 million illegal aliens will cross our border before they make their final ruling. So it's kind of a weird deal, and it gets to what you're saying. It's an invasion. Article 4, Section 4 says the state can stop an invasion if the federal government's obligated to do it, and they're not doing it. And so I would say the state can, I think the federal government has vacated its responsibility for border security. So that's one issue that's going on. But when you start looking at some of these other issues, do you need more Border Patrol agents? Well, you're going to see a spike of people retiring and leaving. And why are they leaving? Some of them are reaching that retirement age that's mandatory, but a lot of them are going to leave as soon as they can because of the job has changed. It's changed from patrolling the border and protecting the border to actually doing these social work functions, as you described, making sandwiches and whatnot. And so we're going to need more Border Patrol agents, but only because they're forcing them out, right? So we'll get more. And then back to the Dan Goldman thing. So Dan doesn't know anything about the border whatsoever, has no clue. Yeah, you could tell. I mean, you just watched it and you could say, yeah, okay, we see. But there are a lot of people who don't know anything about the border. But Dan Goldman, you know, he's just, first of all, insensitive as could possibly can be to the angel mom who's there testifying. I mean, let's acknowledge that she has suffered something that Dan Goldman can't even begin to comprehend. And number two, and the reason why isn't because you don't have Border Patrol agents on the line. The reality is because you have policies that attract illegal aliens into the country at record numbers, so that the Border Patrol can't handle the numbers that this policy is put out to the world. Marianne, 181 nations. 181 nations this fiscal year alone have had people come over to this country. And we're talking, when I was down in Lukeville the other day, right before Christmas, so it's been about 3 weeks now. I asked these people where they're from. I'm from Burkina Faso, Senegal, Guinea, Pakistan, India. You could just, it's the United Nations of illegal aliens coming across the border in Lukeville. Now, you're from Arizona like I am. In Lukeville, Arizona, that's where if you're going down to Rocky Point, you're going to go through Lukeville.
Right.
And they're just flooding that area, and they don't get the media coverage that, like, you got an Eagle Pass and that type of thing. And that's partly because of our governor. But I mean, there's so much to unpack with this issue, Marianne, and I'm glad that you're always on top of this issue, trying to enlighten and get the policies changed and recognizing what's going on, because it is, in my opinion, it's criminal what this administration has done to our border.
Absolutely. But, you know, when I listen to people like Dan Goldberg, and I was really frustrated listening to him, because he's making statements like, this administration has confiscated more fentanyl than the past 5 administrations. Well, heck yeah, you're going to be getting more fentanyl because you have open borders, you know, and I can't believe that people listening to him don't think through, why is this that there's been more fentanyl confiscated, you know, during the Biden administration. It's because of, you know, they don't care. They don't care what's coming over the border. Did you see that video?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I hear it all the time. And think of it this way. Those are the two things that say we've confiscated more fentanyl, and it's all 90% is seized coming through the ports of entry. Now, I want you to think about that. Yeah. First of all, if you ask people on the border, I'm talking CBP agents that are line agents, and I'm talking about ICE, I'm talking about DEA and all that. When you start talking to the line people, they'll say, yes, we think we're still confiscating about 10%, 8 to 10% of everything that's coming across. Well, the reason you have more is exactly what you say. You've got more fentanyl coming in. And why do you think you get it 90% at the ports of entry? Because that's where we still have personnel. You've got drug sniffing dogs. You've got X-ray machines. You've got sensors telling you if you've got greater density in a level in a car than you otherwise would have. You're getting a one-on-one the inspection of pedestrians coming across as well as cars coming across. But you know what you don't have between ports of entry that might be, in some cases, think Sassabee to Naco, which is 30 miles or so as the crow flies. You got 30 miles where there's nobody. And there's nobody because, again, the CBP line agents normally would be there, but they're having to be off the line to process the massive crowds coming through. So where do you think they're going to go? How about Cochise County, which is wide open, and they're bringing people in? You know why you get 90% at the port of entry? Not because that's where it's all coming in, but that's where you have your personnel that can actually interdict it. Where you don't have personnel and technology, we have no idea how much is coming through and getting into the country. And if what they were saying was true, you would actually be seeing fentanyl overdoses and deaths be going down instead of going up.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Marianne, you get me going on a rant, man. That's what's going to happen.
Did you see that recent video of that Middle Eastern man telling whoever was videotaping him, you know, you'll know who I am. You'll find out who I am. that's a pretty chilling statement from somebody just entering our country illegally. And something way down deep in my gut told me, believe this man. What he's saying is true. We're going to know who he is sooner than later. And that is the biggest thing that I think Mayorkas and Biden are facilitating. That I mean, I could say all kinds of bad things online, and I'm not going to, but it's so frustrating. And let me ask you this, because I watched intently when Mayorkas was going through his hearings to become the Department of Homeland Security secretary. And I was screaming at the TV, and I know there was a handful of you that were really, standing firm and not wanting him to be put into place. But don't you find it ironic that we have an immigrant heading Department of Homeland Security that was created after 9/11, and you have an immigrant who is now heading that and actually doing everything against the real reason why we created Department of Homeland Security?
Yeah, it's ironic. It describes it a little bit, but doesn't get to the sense of the palpable frustration I feel. Some of us warned people about Mayorkas, and you're right. All you had to do was listen to his testimony when he started talking about we want to have a more humane system, and he started talking about separation of families and blah blah blah. All of that stuff is untrue, categorically untrue. And so as we said, some of us were saying, don't do it. I mean, you were one, I was one, there were other voices. And what you have now is you have a Secretary of Homeland Security who's basically turned the border over. We have no border, by the way. I just don't believe we have a border anymore. We've lost our geographical integrity. And the narco-terrorist cartel controls the border. And they don't care about the United States of America. What they care about is money. They only care about money. So if and I had a briefing a month ago where Iran is funding Muslim Brotherhood, who is recruiting people from the Middle East, and they make their way over. And I've seen some of them. I've talked to some of these people. They come from Nicaragua. They come in and they land in Nicaragua, work their way up.
Yeah.
And you just go, okay, well, why is that? It is not because they're coming here with good intentions or they need a better job. It's because they are coming here affiliated with a nation that sponsors terrorism everywhere. Venezuela has close ties to Hamas, and we see a lot of Venezuelans coming up, and we don't know what their purpose is. So when you get into it and you say, well, why is Mayorkas doing this? It's, I have my own ideas on why he's doing, but the bottom line is he's made us less safe. Yeah. And the question isn't if, it is when. And, was talking to, again, another expert on terrorist activity who was relating to me. This is about 3 weeks ago now. He said, look, here's the deal. You're not going to see probably necessarily another 9/11, but what you will see are a series of things that you've seen in Europe, where you'll have 15, 20, 100 people who are victimized by a couple of terrorists enacting a terrorist attack. And that is going to come right back to Mayorkas and Joe Biden.
Yeah, so you've got the Department of Homeland Security that was created because of a terrorist attack on the United States. And now you have a Department of Homeland Security facilitating the invasion of foreigners from terrorist states into our country. So it's very, it has to be contrived. It has to be, this is the way they wanted it to happen. I did a whole podcast a couple of weeks ago, Andy, on Mayorkas. I went all the way back through his career and seeing where the turn was in what he was doing. He did some good things over in California when he was in law enforcement, but he got into USCIS and he understood, he figured out the whole workings of everything. Then he was the Deputy Secretary of Department of Homeland Security under Obama. But taking the voice office, the hotline for angel families, and turning that into a hotline for illegals when they call in there to ICE, and then they're transferred immediately over to USCIS to open a case, and they're immediately given work permits, even though they're calling in as a victim of human trafficking. They can have paid $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to be transported here. They can still claim to be victims of human trafficking. But I spent 2 days several years ago making phone calls and getting to the top guy at USCIS and finally admitting to me, yeah, once they're processed through that hotline, they're sent over here and we open a case and we give them a work permit. So Mayorkas has figured this all out, and he does so many things behind the scenes that I'm sure even you members of Congress don't even know the magnitude of what he's doing behind the scenes, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the things that we do know that are so bad that whatever his hidden policies are. I mean, I have some people who provide me with confidential information about policies that come out. But let's think about this. Just think about one program that he has abused, and that's the parole program. And think about that. So until Mayorkas and Joe Biden got into office, you might have had 15, 20 people a year get parole. And parole was supposed to be an individualized administrative process to grant essentially mercy and relief to somebody who had an extraordinary circumstance. Maybe you had a kid who the only place in the world they can get surgery is in Phoenix. And so we're going to give you parole for 3 weeks. You're going to come in, get the kid's going to get the surgery. They're going to take him out. But you know what? And Mayorkas testified to us, Marianne, that parole, he understood parole was meant to be determined on a case-by-case, individualized basis. But they have granted well over 1 million cases of parole. Now, and he's saying, oh, yeah, they're getting case by case. Actually, a Democrat tried to argue with me about this. No, it was in a testimony last week. And I said, you ever been down to the border? Have you ever? No. Have you ever seen anybody, how they grant parole? He said, well, I saw a video once. I said, go down to the border and watch it and tell me that you think they're really getting a case-by-case adjudication on parole that's consistent with the statute, because they're not. And so what happens is they let them all in. They get work permits, Marianne, for 2 years. They're giving them 2-year work permits. Yeah. And once those two-year work permits are gone, they're gone. Not out of the country. We don't know where they are. We don't know where they are now. I mean, Inspector General Kafari said, we don't know where these people are anyway. They come in, they got parole. We have no idea where they are, what they're doing, whether they're working. Don't tell me you got a work shortage when you've let 6 million people in, and who knows, they're not working. Are they getting welfare? What's happening? And this administration doesn't know it. And Mayorkas, I believe, like you say, I believe this is willful, intentional. It just cannot be incompetence. It is totally designed.
Well, and I love all these experts who come in and testify at the congressional hearing, but just like you said, they've never been down to the border, and they're basing their expertise on videotapes that they've watched. There is nothing like being down there and feeling the palpable, the excitement from these people getting across the border, and you're standing there as an American citizen thinking, this is so wrong. I mean, it's a feeling I can't really even put into words, but you cannot get that from watching a video. You cannot be some journalist, on MSNBC and watch a video and think that you know what it's really like down there, because you don't. And right. Thank you from me as a citizen of Arizona, that you do take the time to bring congressional groups down here and let them experience that, because I've met with you guys a couple times, and some of them who've never been there said, man, we had no idea. You have to experience it if you're going to speak on the subject, right?
No, 100%. I mean, So, and you've been great, and we brought you and others to speak to these members of Congress. I've brought more people from Congress down here than anybody else.
Yes.
From San Diego to Rio Grande, I've taken them all over the border. Why? Because until you've stood there, I mean, I get people ask, "Do you ever get concerned?" Because I'll go down by myself, and I'll say, "No, I've never been concerned." The only time I was ever concerned is when I watched two groups that were waiting to get on buses. One bus came, and they all wanted to get on the buses so they go get processed because they know they'd be released. But the bottom line is there were 300 people there. And I'm standing there with one of the county soups from Yuma, and that was the only time I was ever nervous, because these guys were mad at these illegals were mad at each other because each one wanted to get on the bus, and we're standing in the midst of them. But the bottom line is, if they're surrendering, they're not going to be rough or violent because they know they're going to all be released. And when you have to get down there and see it. The last group I had, which was Lukeville, well, I had a group I took to Eagle Pass too, and they were seeing people come across, in steady waves. But when I was in Lukeville, we have a group. I had some of my staff, and we're down there, and they're like, "Oh, we didn't see anybody." And then you look down to the right, and Marianne, a group of 25, then another group of 20, then another group of 30, and they're just coming non-stop. And that's after we had left a full facility that was already over capacity with people that they were trying to process and then transport out to another facility. This is why I take people down, because Bill Malusian and whoever else, some of the others who report on this stuff, they do a great job. But until you're actually standing there,
yeah,
it's crazy to stand there and see with what boldness these people enter our country illegally. I've watched them. You've seen them. They're coming across. They're actually FaceTiming as they're coming across.
Yeah.
And they might be talking Spanish, and I can hear them saying, "Hey, yeah, I've made it. We're across the border now, blah, blah, blah. I'm in the U.S." That's how bold the illegal alien is today under the Biden regime.
Right. They've enabled them to feel that boldness and to feel like they're untouchable once they get here. And, what really concerns me is this, the amount of people coming from Venezuela and that Venezuelan gang that was created in the prisons down there. And, they let them all out of prison, told them get out of the country. And a lot of those are headed this way. They're creating all kinds of havoc on their way up, the murders, the mayhem. They're more violent than MS-13. And there is a lot of them concentrated in New York right now. Out on Randall Island, there's a lot of violence going on out there. But you've got these tent cities or these facilities that they're housing these illegals in. And I'm watching videos, even in the schools, and you have parents complaining, we can't even enter that building unless we go through metal detectors. But these people are just allowed to come in here. And you have all these reports out on Randall Island out there in New York that they're selling drugs, that they have weapons, that they have gangs. And so what kind of supervision is really happening under Mayorkas once these people get into the big cities and they're thrown under the mayors and the city council and they're ill prepared? What does America think is going to happen? The fuse is coming to an end. I mean, things are going to explode because these people who are expecting everything and anything for free and aren't getting what they think that they deserve, their tempers are going to start flaring in a way that I'm afraid to even think about.
Yeah, I think they already are, Marianne. I think so. You've seen some of it already, and you've seen some of the violence. You've seen some of the criminals that are here, and they. So, like I was saying, the Inspector General said that the DHS has lost control and contact with all these people. They don't know where these people are. Office of Refugee and Resettlement, they've lost over 100,000 underage children that were placed willy-nilly in the country. They can't contact them, don't know where they are. And so you have this massive, when you have the influx that you've had, by the way, if you look through history, I can't see any other time outside of when the children of Israel left Egypt. That's the closest that you have of a mass exodus. And this dwarfs that. When you start looking at just the raw numbers, it's overwhelming. And people are you know what? I actually heard people say the other day, well, what are we going to do with these 11 million people? It's not 11 million people. It hasn't been. In 2020, they were talking about 11 million people.
In 2012, they were saying 11 million people.
Exactly. It just that's the number they keep saying. It's not 20. It's closer to 40 million people that are in this country illegally. And until you start removing people and there's over 1 million people who've had due process and have been told you must leave the country, but we don't have control over them because we lost control over them, and so they're wandering around. This administration won't remove even those people, Marianne. If you started removing people that actually had removal orders, that would tremendously slow down the incentive to come into this country. And that's what needs to happen. You got to slow down. You got to take away the incentives. You're talking about benefits. I mean, they all think they're going to get these massive amount of benefits, but there's just not enough money and enough benefits to go around. And so when I watched Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, boot those kids, 4,000 kids out of school and put 2,000 illegal aliens into that school. And he said, oh, yeah, all I saw was children going in there. I'm like, no, all you saw was 4,000 children that you booted out of school in favor of illegal aliens who are not supposed to be in the country. And that's the problem. That's the weird mindset of Mayorkas, Biden, Eric Adams, and those, is that they're going to give primacy to these illegal aliens over Americans.
Well, and so I've read that I think Representative Green said something about, are you guys going to have a markup by January 30th on moving forward with the impeachment article?
So it's not moving. It's not moving out of judiciary. The Homeland Security is the committee now that the speaker is assigned to do the Mayorkas impeachment. My understanding is a markup's going to be done by the end of the month. And so we go back in next Monday, which will be the last week. So my understanding is they're going to mark it up right away. And what that means for you lucky people don't have to follow Congress so much, it means that the resolution to impeach Secretary Mayorkas will receive a vote in that committee. It'll be highly contested. The Democrats will try to offer amendments and the Republicans will kill the amendments. But then after it's from there, then it will go to the floor of the House where it will be debated and then voted upon. And the question is, how quickly will the speaker bring it to the floor for a vote? I think he should bring it sooner rather than later. And that's just me.
So I just want to, I wanted to mention one other thing. I was reading this article last night that the United Nations, and I mean, this has been brought up before, that the United Nations is spending United States taxpayer money and giving it to these people to come to America. And it's been disputed. Well, now this article is saying that's a lie, that the United Nations is using American taxpayer money, some of the money that we give to the United Nations. The other thing that was pretty troubling to me is the United Nations also, I found an article, a tab on their website about remittances. And in that, number 5 of that big thing, basically what it says, Andy, is that remittances are necessary in order for them to carry out the relocation and what they're planning to do with money. We have to redistribute the wealth from the United States to all these other countries. We're looking at $669 billion left the United States in 2023, and they're looking for it to go up to about $674 billion in remittances out of the United States. And so this is a redistribution of wealth throughout the world, is what the United Nations and a lot of these, WEF, all these elites. I mean, this is the plan. We watched it happen to Europe, right? And now, of course, they have to come after the United States.
Yeah, so let me take both of those issues. So you have the Office of Migration, UN Office of Migration. You have a couple other agencies, sub-agencies of the UN. And money is fungible, so when money goes into the UN, um, it gets used for things that you and I wouldn't want. I don't want any money going to the UN, frankly. I want us to get out of the UN.
Yeah.
But they are using it, and I've actually had witnesses tell me that the UN Office of Migration is actually recruiting people from Northern Africa and the Middle East and encouraging them to come to the US because entry is easier than it is now in Europe, because Europe's getting tired of it. I don't know if you've seen this, but France is actually trying to take away the incentives. Their citizenry is so abused now by the mass influx of illegal aliens that they've had that they've had enough. And so even France is taking action. So yes, our dollars are going there. Don't forget that Iran is recruiting as well, and they're using our money, $6 billion as well. So that's one aspect of it as well when you start considering that. And then what was your second point? Oh, the money, the remittances. Yes, so the remittances. So yeah, remittances have been a problem. I started studying this more than 20 years ago. Remittances have been a problem, but the remittances from the U.S. were, on a percentage basis compared to where they are today, was just a fraction, just a reasonable fraction, and it was going out. But for Mexico, the number 2 hard cash, hard dollar product that they have outside of oil and gas is remittances from the United States, and people need to understand that. And what a remittance is, that is money that is not taxed. It's money that's just usually under the table. It's sent out through a wire transfer back home or whatever. It's gone. That's taken out of our economy. And so it's a problem. I actually introduced legislation my first year in Congress, and I said we're gonna tax remittances. Some remittances are legitimate because they have paid taxes on them, and it's by people who are
immigrants.
Yeah, they're legal immigrants. They're naturalized citizens. They're sending money back home to friends or whatever. So you can't outlaw all of them, but what you can do is you can tax them. And so I proposed a tax, and to use that tax to pay for the fence, the border wall. And Speaker Paul Ryan at the time.
Oh, shoot. We lost him. I'm hoping that he connects back with us because I really want to hear what he had to say. Very interesting conversation with him. Let me see if I can get a hold of him. Oh, geez. Matthew. We'll call Matthew, his comms director. See if we can get him back. Can you connect them back up? Yes. Okay. Do I text it to you or email it? Okay. I'll email it to you right now. Okay. Bye-bye. All right. So I'm going to email the text or the link, and we'll get him back on here so that we can finish our conversation that we were having, because I think it's really important that we get the gist of all of this. And then I've got some final questions that I'm going to ask him regarding Mayorkas and the impeachment hearing and whatnot. And then I'm going to go over a few things that Andy has done throughout the years, how he's voted regarding illegal immigration. And you will understand that he is all about making sure that American citizens are protected. that American citizens are the priority. And that's what I appreciate so much about Andy Biggs, because you've got a lot of representatives out there who don't make their constituents and the wishes of their constituents the priority. And also just to understand the oath that they took in protecting the United States and its citizens. So there's a lot of crazy representatives who really aren't doing, what they should be doing. And that's one thing I can't say about Andy Biggs, because he's always been on top of things and always been more than willing to meet, to talk, to have conversations. And the thing I appreciate the most about him too is when he's in town, he will, put an email out and say, hey, I'm having a meeting at my house. I want to give you all updates on what's happening in DC. And so some of his constituents, and I'm actually not in his district, but because we have a close connection regarding illegal immigration, he always puts the invitation out to me. And it's always good to see the people. And, these hour and a half meetings that he usually has for updates go 2 and 2.5 hours, because he just engages with people and answers any and all questions that people may have for him. So, yeah, let me see. This latest link got sent. So hopefully Andy will be popping up here in a minute. We can get him back on here to finish these questions that I have for him. Here he comes. There you are.
Yeah.
So you were talking about Paul Ryan.
Yeah. So I had introduced this legislation because remittances was one way to get the Mexican government to actually pay for it, because it would take away, if you tax the remittances, it would take away that money going into Mexico, et cetera. But Paul Ryan actually killed my bill. He was the Speaker of the House and killed my bill. And when I talked to him, he said he didn't want to do anything controversial. And I said, how is it controversial to do what every one of us campaigned on? And that was to build a wall and to slow down illegal immigration. Don't forget, we thought illegal immigration was bad when you were getting somewhere around 1,000 people a day across the entire southern border.
Yeah.
And there are sectors now that are getting 1,000 people a day just in that sector alone. And last month, you had encounters over 10,000 a day on average. And then by the time you throw in gotaways known and unknown, you're really having closer to 12,000, let's see, 13. Yeah, between 13 and 15,000 people a day entering our country illegally.
It's insane. I mean, even down in Lukeville, I think this last week it was 12,000 just right in the Lukeville area for the week.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple questions I want to ask you. First of all, I just want to point out that so Andy Biggs has always been a champion and always carefully reads bills and things that are brought forward and understands how it's going to affect American citizens. And that's what I appreciate so much about you. But you voted against the Fairness of High-Skilled Immigrants Act of 2019, which would have amended the Immigration and Nationality Act to eliminate the per-country numerical limitation for employee-based immigrants to increase the per-country limitation for family-sponsored immigrants. And, I look at that like you were protecting American jobs for Americans. You also voted against the Further Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2020, which authorizes DHS to nearly double the available H-2B visas, which is another thing that Mayorkas, I think, abuses, is those H-2B visas. And you also voted against the Consolidated Appropriations Act, HR 1158, which effectively prohibits ICE from cooperating with Health and Human Services to detain and remove illegal alien sponsors of unaccompanied alien children. So you're always looking for the real reason behind these things, because you can put a really nice headline or a really nice title to a bill, and if you're not a serious congressional member who's going to take your job seriously, you're going to look at a title and say, oh, it's all wrapped up pretty in a bow, and vote to pass it, right?
Yeah, and I'll say I have a great staff. As you know, most of the people on my staff, I've kind of trained everybody. We're looking for these things, and we're gonna go through this stuff and try to find them. And then I would say the Freedom Caucus helps look for that stuff as well. And so between us, we try to have multiple eyes looking to see what's going to happen. None of that stuff on those extraneous bills, Marianne. First of all, they lard them up with a bunch of things. It's a Christmas tree, Joe Blow from Texas wants this, and John Jones wants it from Minnesota. So they're going to put these things on there, and when they do that, that it's in order to buy everybody off, and that's part of the corruption in Congress, in my opinion. They'll say, well, we're just negotiating. No, you're not just negotiating. You're trying to buy votes to get them to come along. And those types of things that you mentioned, they don't do anything to actually benefit Americans by and large. There's going to be a small group here that might get a benefit from that, or here, but I don't think that they're getting big benefits across the board. And the general welfare and the general good means everybody's benefited by the economy and the freedoms that we have. And this administration has repeatedly attacked those. And don't forget to mention most of those bills that you're talking about keep spending us into oblivion, which is part of our problem. We've got a structural deficit every year in excess of $2 trillion. We borrow in excess of $2 trillion every year. Next year at this time, you're going to have a $36 trillion national debt if it's that low.
Unbelievable. Well, and people have to listen to these bills that are going back and forth. The budget, and how the Republicans want to get something regarding the border in there, and the Democrats are refusing to do that. But when they talk about we need more Border Patrol agents and we need more technology, I mean, you listen to the key words that the Democrats use, and technology, in my opinion, what the Democrats mean is hiring more NGOs and putting up more tents and processing centers and doing the technical kind of stuff to enable them to continue the invasion and the infiltration of the United States. I don't think it's technology to stop what's going on by any means.
Yeah, they're not talking about making sure that the wiring's connected, so you have this ground sensors in there, and you have the cameras there, and they're going back, and you have the communications that's broader and more comprehensive along the border. Because as you and I both know, there are places even within the Arizona border that there's no communication, and you have places that if they're able to get the communication out, it'll still take 2 to 4 hours before assistance will come in and be able to help out, because it's so remote and rugged. So no, they're not trying to do anything to make it better. They're trying to actually emphasize the incentive structure for illegal aliens to come into the country. That's what they're talking about. And that's one of the reasons that you have to say no. You have to fight it out and give it everything you had to have to stop it. The Democrats really are content. I get a kick out of one of El Paso's members of Congress is a Democrat, and she's always telling us that how wonderful it is. Once in a while, it'll escape from her mouth that there's been a rush here, but then it's the Republicans' fault. For what? We're the ones trying to enforce border laws. You're the ones not. So don't be telling us that everything's hunky dory. But I would tell you, I would be nervous if I lived in El Paso, because their member of Congress and some of their local officials think it's great to have an open border. And is
that Veronica Escobar?
Why, yes, it is.
Love hearing her talk about how everything is so hunky dory.
Yeah.
So, Andy, can states pass laws to create the safety for their residents that the federal government is ignoring? I know you and I talked about this, but I want you to just kind of share that with my viewers.
I think states should pass laws and do everything they possibly can to effectuate safety for their citizens. The federal government, I believe, has actually abdicated its duty. It's vacated. Well, we say, the case law, and it calls it vacating the field. I think the federal government's vacated the field, and I think that states should. I mean, look, you and I live in Arizona. Even Governor Ducey and I, there were times I was critical of Governor Ducey, but at least down in Yuma, for instance, he put up these containers, right? And then he created a state border security task force out of the Department of Public Safety. So he had people that were actually trying to facilitate. He got National Guard down there on the border, whether they did much or they did what they were legally allowed to do. He wasn't as aggressive as Greg Abbott in Texas is, but the current governor of Arizona took down the containers. She got rid of the task force. She encouraged illegal aliens to come in. They encouraged a kind of a sanctuary city model. And now she's like, well, that's bad politically, so maybe I need to do something. It shouldn't be because it's bad politically. It should be because you're going to protect your state's citizens from the problems that come with rabid mass illegal immigration, and that's not what we have in Arizona. So yeah, they can pass laws. They should pass laws. I think our state legislature has tried to pass laws, but I think that she has threatened to veto them and kill them, and that's a problem because of Arizona.
To get a strong majority in the legislation in Arizona during this round, so that we can, override her vetoes and just get the things through that we need to get through. I have one last question for you. How do you think that how do you think the vote's going to go as far as the Republicans? Do you think they're going to vote along party lines for the impeachment of Mayorkas? Do you think there's going to be Democrats to join you?
Okay, so let's answer that first. There's a couple of Democrats that really agree with me that privately I've talked with them, and they will come up and they'll say, yeah, this is awful. We're getting inundated. But they tell me that, but they never put up, and they never put their vote where their mouth is. And I call it the board of truth for a reason. If you really think something, then you're going to vote on the board that way. That will reveal who you are.
Right.
Our other problem is we can't lose more than one vote on the Republican side. And there's a couple of votes. A couple of people are like, well, I'm just not sure if impeachment's the right avenue or whatnot. And so I still think you put it up. Everybody gets to go up on the board of truth and expose what they really believe. And hopefully we'll have enough votes to impeach Mayorkas because, and Mayorkas is basically told Kat Kamek apparently that you're not going to like whoever comes after me. I'm just like, hey, you explained to me how, 6 million releases into the country over a 3-year period. You're averaging over 2 million, not to mention the gotaways. Yeah. How's it going to be worse? How is it going to be worse, Secretary Mayorkas?
It's not like he's going to present his replacement. It has to go through all of you again, right?
Goes through the Senate, but what'll happen is the president can appoint on a temporary basis, which would probably at this point last until the inauguration, hopefully, of a Trump administration next January.
Right. Well, Andy, we're running out of time here, but I just want to thank you so much for taking the time that you did. I appreciate you so much. Everybody, he's running for re-election. You can always go. What's your website?
Biggs.house.gov. I can't really talk. I cannot talk about.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You're in session. That's right. Okay.
My campaign website with you today.
Yes, I forgot about that. All right. I will after you leave the screen. thank you again for all of your help and your information. And again, I appreciate you, and I hope you have a great rest of your week, Andy.
Yeah, thank you too, Marianne. God bless you. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, yeah, I forgot they're in session. You can't talk about that sort of thing. But Andy Biggs for Congress, even if you're out of state, please vote for this man. He stands up for us in Congress. He understands the wickedness and the evilness that's going on and really protects us from the overspenders and the weirdos in DC who are elected into office who really don't care about us as citizens. So support Andy Biggs, and we will see you tomorrow. And on Thursday, I'm going to have Jerome Davison from Arizona, who's running for Congress, a fantastic candidate. I think you're really going to enjoy listening to him. But I hope you all have a great rest of your Tuesday afternoon, and thanks for joining us.